Now we'll look at the lungs, which occupy almost the entire thoracic cavity, except for the space in between the lungs, which we call the mediastinum. That's occupied by the heart and by some vessels and ducts in the superior portion of the mediastinum. And this part of the lung, the root, where all that vascular and bronchial attachment to the mediastinum is from the lung. So if we look at the lung, we can see that the left lung has only two lobes. There's the division, a left superior lobe and a left inferior lobe. It's smaller than the right lung because the left heart takes up more space than the right side of the heart. So you get this, what's called a cardiac notch, where that left muscular region of the heart, the left ventricle, takes up that space. But the right lung has three lobes. You can see the divisions. There's a right superior lobe, a right middle, and a right inferior lobe. So each lobe, 3 on the right, 2 on the left, is further divided into bronchopulmonary segments. Each segment is separated by a septa, which is a division, by connective tissue. Each is served by its own artery, vein, and bronchus, which means if one bronchopulmonary segment is diseased, it can be removed because there's quite a few others left over. Let's see. Right superior lobe has 3 segments, right middle has 2, right inferior has 5. On the left side, remember, there's only 2 lobes, 4 in the left superior, 5 in the left inferior. So we have 9 total lobes on the, segments on the left, and 10 total segments on the right. Lungs are mostly alveoli, the air sacs. The rest are other functional cells we call stroma, and elastic connective tissue. So if you recall elastic connective tissue, it's going to make the lungs very pliable, very elastic, very spongy, and that helps with breathing. The lungs are supplied by 2 circulations. We've only seen one in previous chapter, the pulmonary circulation. Recall this is deoxygenated blood that returns to the right side of the heart, so it gets pumped to the lungs for to become oxidized. So you can see the blue turning to red as this capillary bed runs through the lungs, the gas exchange, which is delivered to the left side of the heart. So there's your pulmonary circulation. It involves the lungs. Of course, the pulmonary arteries carry blood to the lungs for oxidation, and the pulmonary veins carry this freshly oxygenated blood back to the heart. Well, how does the lung tissue itself receive oxygen if the blood being delivered there is deoxygenated? Well, we have a systemic circuit. We know that. The left side of the heart pumps blood to all tissues in the body, and all tissues of the body include the lungs. So when the blood gets pumped out into the aorta, there's a branch. The bronchial arteries carry oxygenated blood to supply the lung cells or lung tissue. This would be called the bronchial circulation, and that blood actually returns through the pulmonary circuit to the left side of the heart. So you got this regular pulmonary circuit that we've learned about, but we also have this bronchial circuit to feed the lung tissue oxygenated blood. So you don't see the bronchial circuit here, but it exists. And here's the write-up on it. The bronchial circulation, the bronchial arteries provide oxygenated blood to the lung tissue. Those arteries come from the aorta. It's part of the systemic circulation. We know that's high pressure but low volume. Supply all lung tissue except the alveoli, and the bronchial veins will anastomose, right? Different paths they can take. It'll anastomose with the pulmonary veins and then back to the heart. Lungs are innervated by parasympathetic and sympathetic, and of course parasympathetic causes bronchoconstriction, where sympathetic causes bronchodilation. We'll see more on this at the very end of this chapter. The pleura is a serous membrane surrounding a lung. So we have two pleurae, one for each lung. So the thoracic cavity will be divided into these two pleural compartments, as well as a pericardial compartment, and that's fine. Now, the pleura, you might recall from previous chapters, long time ago, is a double-layered serous membrane. And a serous membrane means there's two layers with fluid in between these two layers. This is going to be very important for the lung, which we'll see with the physiology a little later on. So whenever you have a serous membrane, like the pleura, for example, it's double-layered. The inner layer in contact with the organ is the visceral pleura, and then the outer layer in contact with the wall of the cavity is the parietal pleura. So the pleural fluid, which is serous fluid, will fill in that cavity in between those two layers, the visceral and parietal. It's going to provide lubrication. It's going to prevent friction from organs moving in our thoracic cavity. It provides high surface tension that resists the separation of the two layers. It keeps the lungs inflated, which we'll see in a short period of time. So pleurisy is when the pleura become inflamed. Often results from pneumonia. They become rough. Friction develops, and when friction develops in those pleural layers, there's stabbing pains with each breath. It can produce excessive amounts of fluid, which will relieve the pain from friction, but that'll exert a lot of pressure on the lungs, which will make it difficult to breathe. So fluid can also enter that pleural cavity. When I say fluid, excess fluid on top of the normal fluid that exists in there, the serous fluid. We call that pleural effusion, when fluid accumulates in this pleural cavity. It could be blood coming in from damaged vessels, blood filtrate, like the plasma part, the watery fluid that oozes from lungs, capillaries, when the left side of the heart fails. You get that buildup or edema almost in the lungs that we call pleural effusion. So we completed our lower respiratory system last video and this video, starting with the larynx all the way down to the lungs and pleura. These are our organs. There's the description and the function of each of these lower respiratory organs.